Okay. Hello, everybody, and welcome to our first third Thursday of our fifth season. Right away, I'm just going to get into a few housekeeping items so that everyone's comfortable on Zoom. Today's event it does have closed captioning. So if you just look at the bottom on your toolbar, you'll see the CC icon, and you can press that to have closed captioning in English. We encourage you to use the chat and engage with your college community. That's what these events are all about. We have some incredible speakers today, and we will be doing a Q&A. So as they speak, start to think about what kind of questions you'll want to ask, and you can submit those in the Q&A tab as well. Okay, so that's done. I have to say I was very, very excited all morning. I feel like I really need to take a breath and just start breathing slowly because I've been speaking so quickly. I'm honestly just so excited to have our first third Thursday of our fifth season. I'm so happy to see so many participants here, and whether you are an old-time viewer to Third Thursdays or this is your first one, I want to say welcome and thank you so much for joining. Today's Third Thursday is finding humor in the workplace, and I think after the year-ish we've had, we can certainly all use a bit of humor. A little bit about Third Thursday to start. It's all about sparking ideas and creating community at Algonquin College. Every month we hear from experts and innovators to share their stories that inspire and empower us to help us be the people we want to be, whatever that looks like. So with that, I'm going to ask Ryan. We have a wonderful video that helps explain the philosophy of Third Thursday, and I will ask Ryan to play the video now.
Hey Algonquin College, we're launching the fifth season of Third Thursday. Third Thursdays are conversations that spark ideas and create community. Every month, we invite local experts and innovators to share stories that inspire and empower listeners. Tune in on the third Thursday of every month from your home. We challenge you to change your space into a place, and we'll bring inspiring innovators from inspiring places to you virtually. Let's explore this new reality together. Students, employees, alumni, and community partners forge meaningful connections while learning from each other. The Third Thursday community is story-driven, curious, and collaborative. And we're not afraid of perspective shifts or pushing the envelope. We skip the small talk and dig deep into topics that matter. We're here to fuel dreams through dialogue and turn passion into purpose. Come and be a part of the story.
Perfect. Thank you, Ryan. So for everyone who is a first-time viewer of Third Thursday, that gives you a bit of a better idea. My name is Susan Pridmore. I'm with the college events team at Algonquin College. And I must say, I say it all the time, this is one of my favorite parts of my job is hosting Third Thursdays. So let's get into it. While I am the host, we always have wonderful speakers and we always have someone introduce our speakers. So today I'm thrilled to introduce Ron McClester, our VP of Truth, Reconciliation, and Indigenization. So I'll pass it over to Ron to introduce our wonderful speakers today. Thank you, Ron.
Sorry about that. I sometimes have driver issues with my microphone here. So thank you, Susan, and welcome everybody. Happy to be here to welcome our guest speakers, Janelle and Ali. My name is Ron McClester. My traditional name is Steganadasa, and I am Turtle Clan from the Oneida Nation of the Iroquois people. Although we are located likely all over the place today for our meeting in our time together, the college is situated on the unsurrendered and unceded territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe people, and I like to make sure that we acknowledge that. Now, two other things before I get a little bit deeper into the words they asked me to share. I am battling crazy allergies right now, so I will apologize in advance for that. I am 42 years old, and it was only since this spring that I've had allergies, and now this fall. And as an Indigenous person, I keep thinking, like, how is it that I'm allergic to nature? I don't know. I kind of had a whole lifetime not being allergic to nature, and all of a sudden I find myself sniffling and sneezing, and I don't know. The other thing I'll say is I just took the dog outside before we started our meeting here, and it's raining down here in Kitchener, and holy heck, my hair went just flat. So I said to the group, emergency, hair emergency. I'm going to be doing this live broadcast with really flat hair and allergies. So we'll just have to make our way through that. Again, a little bit of humor in the workplace. So as Susan said, the intention of Third Thursdays is to connect the college community and why it's so important. It's why it's so important that we have a connection to our peers and our colleagues, the student population that we serve, and just in general, the community. And when we think about the experiences that we've had over the last year and a half, there's certainly a lot of emotion that is attached to those experiences. And of course, those have been very unique to every individual. One way to help us cope as a community is through humor. So we have two outstanding comedians today to help shed some light and insight on humor in the workplace. Janelle Niles launched her comedy career in January 2019 and started producing soon after. Getting recognition in the Ottawa comedy scene for her Indigenous comedy show, Got Land, Janelle aims to communicate cultural concerns in the Indigenous community through laughter. By incorporating all genres of comedy into Got Land, Janelle's intention is to improve the growth of Indigenous entertainment in comedy. Ali Hassan, a stand-up comic and actor who has performed for audiences across Canada and internationally. Ali is the host of CBC's hit stand-up comedy show, Laugh Out Loud. I'm personally a big fan. And a frequent guest host of CBC's Radio National Flagship Arts and Culture Show, Q. And for the past 4 consecutive years, Ali has also hosted Canada Reads, an annual battle of books celebrating the best of Canadian literature. And I think the last one that I listened closely to resulted in, is it Rising from the Ashes? Or anyway, something like that. It was a really good show and really good to hear.
From the Ashes. Yeah.
From the Ashes. It's actually on my bedstand over there. It's 3 books deep, so it'll be a little while, but I'm very excited to do that. Anyway, with that, let's consider our event open. Again, welcome to everybody, and let's have some fun. Please welcome Janelle and Ali.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much, Ron. That was beautiful. I really respect the land acknowledgement, but that's not for us. It's for them because we are quite aware. Yes, we are. Thank you guys so much for being here. I'm so happy to be here and to get to speak to a professional comedian. I just started comedy about 3 years ago, and I would like to also bring Ali here today. Ali Hassan.
Hi, Janelle.
Hi, how are you doing?
I'm great. I love this background. I feel like you're gonna throw to, field reporter Ali Hassan. What's it like out there, Ali? It's hot. It's really hot, Janelle. I feel like I have to speak in a field reporter voice while I'm communicating with you back at the head office or something.
Exactly. Or it's tonight on Weekend Update. Rest in peace, Norm Macdonald.
Exactly.
Thank you so much for having this conversation with me tonight, and to Algonquin College in Kwekwe, to all of our people. I do have some questions to ask you. How has humor played like an important role in your life, Ali?
Well, I've been performing comedy for money for the last 15 years. I say for money, it's an important distinction because I was an unpaid goofball prior to that, which also has its value. I wanted to talk about that a little bit today too, that before I was a paid comedian, in those few years before, I'm blessed, I guess, to have very cheap friends, and they would hire me for their weddings to be, the MC at their weddings. And I was like, it's kind of an honor, and it's kind of also you trying to save some money. But anyway, what a gift that was, in the sense that if you know anything about Indian Pakistani weddings, 400, 500 people, and I'm just sort of thrown into a situation where I'm like, how do I make people of all ages, different backgrounds potentially, how do I make all these people laugh? And it gets you into a space of thinking about your audience a little bit. And that kind of made me, the panderer that I am, probably. Some people do comedy and they're like, this is my stand-up, you come to me. I don't care how I'm more like, let me look around, I'm a host. I'm a consummate host. And that was good. And before that, in school, a class clown, which is not always good, but it, as what we're talking about today, there is something good about it in the sense that you're in a semi-safe space where you can try, material. I didn't know I was ever going to be a professional comedian in high school, but you're trying, so you say something, it makes your friends laugh. You say another thing, oh, it makes your teacher laugh. You say another thing, oh, you got detention, and you're like, okay, that's the line, right? And I think learning where the line is and learning how much you can push is a valuable skill as you incorporate humor into your life, not just somebody who wants to be a comedian, but somebody who is going to use comedy in any aspect of their life. You should know, reading the room, very, very important skill that you need to learn.
Exactly. As a new comedian, I've recently learned that the audience wants to be talked with and not talked at. And that's something I'm learning lately because we need to break that tension. There's some tension going on with the pandemic. And if you address it, then people can relax. So Absolutely. I have another question for you, Ali. For Indigenous peoples, like humor is how we show affection. We like to joke and kid, and it also to break the tension and uncomfortable moments. Is humor an effective tool when communicating with others in your life?
Absolutely. I mean, look, for me, it's almost a curse where I can't go like a full minute of a normal conversation. If somebody is trying to explain to me like mortgage rates, it's going to go off the rails very quickly. A part of that is my own nervousness. I can't afford a mortgage. And so I start making jokes. But part of it is like, I can't be serious for too long. I don't enjoy it. And I need to be, the child inside me needs to constantly be enjoying themselves. But, if we talk about the audience today is students and teachers and faculty, people of all ages. If we talk about, using humor to your advantage in a professional setting, that's also very valuable. Like, it's one thing to break the tension with somebody who might be going through something difficult or challenging. Or groups of people who are going through, as you said, you're learning in the clubs, talk with, not talk at, because of the climate we're in. And that's kind of like a controlled environment. But when you have, like a presentation you're doing or something, working in a team in class, working with a team at work, I think humor can also be very, very valuable. But I think also there's there's an exam. It's not easy. I think that's the thing I want to impart to people. It does take work, right? Janelle, you just mentioned you've been doing this for 3 years and you're still learning. At 15 years, you are also still learning. And they say in comedy, your number of years in comedy is equivalent to how old you would be as a person. So, you would be like a 3-year-old. I would be like a 15-year-old. So still a lot to learn, still things that will surprise me and come along and challenge me, which is not a bad thing. So if people think that I can use humor, I'm funny with my friends and I'm funny with my family, it's not always that easy, right? And it does take work. But can it work? I absolutely think it can. And I always think of this example. Janelle, I don't know if you would have ever heard of a show called WKRP in Cincinnati, but some people might know this show. It was a sitcom in the early 80s. And there was a guy on that show called Classic, Raymond is saying. So some people know the show. There was a guy, Tim Reed, he played Venus Flytrap. He was a radio DJ, very smooth, sultry voice on the radio. Anyway, Venus Flytrap was played by a guy named Tim Reed. And Tim Reed and Tom Dreesen, and I encourage people to look up Tim and Tom. Tim Reed, Tom Dreesen, they were the first and only white-black comedy duo ever. Like there may be one now somewhere, but they haven't reached any huge prominence. But they were white and black, which is not a big deal in 2021. But this was the 70s, and it was huge. And so they were brought together. Somebody had asked if they would both come together and talk to inner city youth about drug use. There were people in elementary school, so going up to grade 8, getting involved with drugs. And so these two paired with each other, and some kids said, I think you guys should be a comedy duo. And so they became this duo, and actually the program they created together became so popular that they started using it across the United States. And the reason I bring up Tim and Tom is because it was a black man and a white man, and they were going into the inner city and talking to kids, and it was very successful in its own right, the program. So if it can work in those environments, and understand in the 70s, Black people were mad at Tim for hanging out with a white guy, and black people were mad at Tom for being a white guy in certain environments. Then white people were mad at Tom Dreesen for hanging out with this black guy, Tim Reed, and white people were also, in many cases, racists against Tim Reed. He was poisoned. They were almost beaten. They had to race. I mean, this is like crazy. But if comedy worked for them, comedy can work for you. You can find a way to make it work for you, right? If the inner city youth are connecting with it, know that it's not impossible. Know that it's not too daunting. It's worked in the craziest of scenarios, the most challenging of scenarios. So I think, yes, it's an effective tool. So I just wanted to open by saying that if anybody's like, it's not really for me, it wouldn't work in my context, it wouldn't work in the environment I'm in, I would say it just might. I would say it's very possible that it just might.
Oh, wow. I'm just thinking like Tim and Tom. Hollywood really grabbed that up for all those buddy cop movies, eh?
Tim and Tom.
That's it, Tim and Tom. So someone actually had a question in the chat. I have to mention it. They're like, "How do you make mortgages funny?" I'm like, "Oh, you make it the same price as rent. That's
Yeah.
that's how you make it." So humor
You do
is.
away with it.
I'm sorry.
You do away with them. That's how you
Do
make
away with them. Yes.
You make them a thing of the past.
Oh, I hope so. One day, one day, when the aliens attack, I think we'll unite. So humor is said to be subjective, and to person, it's something's funny to someone, something's not funny to the other. So how can humor be universally utilized?
That's an interesting question, because I think that would be something that people say that I've been to a comedy club where people are laughing, but I'm not laughing. Or I've been part of an environment where I'm laughing, most people are laughing, but somebody isn't. So it's a fair question that not everybody connects with the same type of humor. But I will say this, we're not talking about stand-up, right? Stand-up is, people have paid money to see you laugh, so they have certain expectations of you, as they should. It's somewhat of a hostile environment, especially that Friday late show. It's a little bit hostile. There is some element of like, okay, make me laugh, funny lady, funny boy, this kind of, right? We've all seen that. All comedians have seen that person in the front row.
Yeah.
Or if you're, a dad, that hostile environment of trying to make your children laugh, they're like, oh, gross, dad is making jokes again. This is not what we're talking about here. When we talk about humor in the workplace, we talk about humor in school and in academia, there are no expectations. So you almost have an advantage in a way. You know what I mean? There's nobody expecting you to make them laugh. So if you can do it, and you can do it in a sort of a controlled way. So when you have no expectations of you, it doesn't have to be a killer punchline that blows the roof off the place. It can just be something that's amusing, moderately or very amusing, that sort of breaks tension, that puts people at ease. So it doesn't have. So you're kind of at an advantage when you're not in this comedy environment. So a classic comedy environment. I think also people would wonder, what if it doesn't come naturally to me, comedy? And I think that we go back to this idea of these things take work. These things all take work. And there's a lot of, I think of myself with the guitar, some people pick up a guitar and their progress is very, very quick. Think of any instrument that anybody has ever played. Some people take to it naturally, and other people, I have a friend, his 3 kids all play instruments. They're like a band. The 3 kids are basically a piano, guitar, drums, singer, and I'm so envious and jealous of that. I've tried to put that on my own children. They're not having it. They have no interest or attention for music, and genetically, I'm not giving them anything.
That's actually one of the next questions I was going to ask you, because it's one of my favorite things to ask a pro comic. Can comedy be learned? Should it come naturally?
I teach stand-up comedy. I teach stand-up comedy at Queens. Am I allowed to mention Queens with an Algonquin audience? Will they anything happening in the background? I apologize. That's where the job offer came. So I teach stand-up comedy. It's a class in the Dan School of Drama and Theater. It's a brand new class, and this is, sometimes I have engineering students who take the class. Sometimes I have media students, and often it's drama students. And people are, sometimes they take it because they want a challenge. And I think that's the right approach, because even some people are very funny, but translating that onto stage, translating that into a PowerPoint document, translating that into a public speech that you have to make is not always that easy. So a very important thing I'm going to say that, you put in the work. And also I'm going to use an example of, a couple of times I've had a stylist hired on my behalf, a fashion stylist, because I was going to be on television. They looked at me and they said, whatever you have here, this hoodie and camouflage pants, this is not working. We're going to get you a stylist. So a few times I've had stylists in my life, and it's the same for me. Comedy and fashion, there's one thing that's in common when you're taking a crack at either of those things. 10%. Take what you're comfortable with and add 10%. Okay, that's what they say in fashion. So what that means in fashion, maybe it's like, okay, put some bracelets on your wrists, wear a shirt that has a little more color than you're comfortable to. Just, you raised it 10%. I would say the same thing with comedy. I would say, especially if you're using it in an environment that you haven't, a PowerPoint presentation, a workplace presentation, a workplace talk, a talk with your team, in an academic environment. I would say just push 10%. And a great, I wanted to give you some practical examples, and I think this might be a good time because you're asking about if it doesn't come naturally, and it doesn't to a lot of people. And even for those who comedy comes naturally for, translating it into these different, vehicles, not always that easy. But you're familiar with the rule of three, I'm sure, Janelle, but the rule of three, if you don't know, and I think you may know, but I'm just going to outline this as clearly as possible. The number three, triples, things that come in triplets are very digestible by the human mind, whether it's, Three Musketeers, the Three Amigos, Tres Leches cake, whatever. Three is a very digestible number. And in PowerPoint presentations, 3 bullet points, they always say, right? So it's what the human mind can really capture all three and remember all 3 points. But in comedy, the rule of three goes a little further, right? The rule of three is you take something that's, it's almost like that idea of like the setup, the anticipation, and then the surprise all in just one line. So I'm going to, Harlan Williams had a joke about his dad being very cheap. And he would say, my dad is so cheap. He's always, the electricity bill, the bill. He goes, if my dad ever died, he'd see the light, he'd walk towards it, and then he'd shut it off to save electricity, right? So that's the 3 things, walk the light, right? Here's one that I think you might appreciate, Janelle. Maybe you've heard it before, maybe you hadn't. Jon Stewart has this joke about Thanksgiving. So he says, okay, so this year I celebrated Thanksgiving in an old-fashioned way. I invited everybody in my neighborhood over to the house. We had an enormous feast, and then I killed them and took their land. Thanksgiving in an old-fashioned way, right? So he's making fun of white man, he's making fun of colonial, settler mentality and all that. So he's, and it's in threes. And I always remember that joke because it came in those threes. So if you wanted to push, for example, that 10% in whatever environment you're in, that's a way to do it. Like in this presentation, I'll do one funny thing. I'll explore humor in this one way, which is I'll do a rule of three joke. A normal thing, and then a surprise element, and you'll be surprised like what that gets, especially when you have no expectations on you to perform. People will be like, oh, that was great. What a great line. And I know, I've coached people through things where they say afterwards to me that I feel like people didn't remember most of what I said, except for the couple of jokes that you wrote for me or you encouraged me to do, you know what I mean? And that's the power of comedy. It sticks with you. It resonates. And I think as comedians, we're always so tough on ourselves. It's like, oh my God, I blew that joke. I forgot to tell this joke. But when you talk to people, they really only remember 60 to 70% of your set anyway. So if it was 60% great, you've done a good job. And half the time, people will come to you afterwards and go, I love that joke you made about your Filipino mom. And I'm like, I'm not Filipino. That was not my joke.
Yeah.
That was somebody else. That was a different thing. So half the time they're not even, that because you have like 8 comedians on a show and people have sort of mixed up who was who. But when you're presenting and you're the only presenter, that's your time. You can shine, you can go places, and so it's about having an openness to comedy, and also, just a willingness to go places, and also the willingness to read the room.
Oh, yes.
If you're the person who, everybody in the family thinks you have kind of an inappropriate sense of humor, at work, yes. So at work, but your work is different, obviously, Janelle. You're able to show off your inappropriateness and make some money off of it. But at work, generally, you don't want to say something that is borderline sexist, misogynistic, racist, and you're like, oh gosh, that killed in the shed this weekend when I was telling my dad. Yeah, that's not, this is not what we're talking about. That's humor in the family, which plays by a different set of rules completely, right? When you're talking about humor in the workplace, it's really about making sure that you understand the rules that your workplace operates under and what you can push and what you can't push. And I also say that to kind of protect myself. The last thing I need is somebody at work saying something grossly inappropriate and being like, Ali Hassan told me this was cool. It's not cool. It may not be cool. Read the room and figure out if it's cool. It may or may not be.
Exactly. I just wanted a little travel back in time here, but
Yeah.
I just want to tell people I did find that joke you said about Jon Stewart's joke funny. I have this problem that most open micer comedians have is when someone's trying to tell you a joke, another fellow comedian, we're also thinking of a joke in our head and we miss the punchline. So
100%.
that's why I didn't throw back and laugh.
No. I didn't expect. I thought you might appreciate it, and you were just sitting in an appreciation of, way to go, Jon Stewart. Stick it to the white man on that joke.
Yeah. He's an ally, I guess.
He's an ally. You know who else doesn't find jokes funny is the partner of a comedian.
Yes.
Like my wife, when I tell her a joke that I'm thinking of, this is her reaction all the time. I'm like, is really not doing it for me. I mean, can I take it to the stage? She's like, no, but I'm just thinking because, you have that other joke about the cowboy boots and maybe you can tie this in. I'm like, oh, wow. She's like really 10 steps ahead of me trying to see how I can sound better on stage. And other wives and husbands and partners are just sick of hearing their partner's jokes, especially when it's about them half the time too. But anyway, I'm used to also getting no response. I have 4 children. I have a wife. I was not offended in any way that you didn't laugh.
I wanted to be respectful.
Yeah, no, I love it. Thank you so much.
No worries. I do want to ask a question for the students. I was a student myself, and this question is, everybody please keep your ears open for this one. How can humor be used in the classroom, for students and teachers alike?
Well, this goes back to what I'm saying, that there is some level of reading. Right when I was in high school, the best thing that could happen in my mind is I make the teacher laugh. If I made the teacher laugh, I went home with a real spring in my step that day, because they don't want to laugh. They don't want to give kids the satisfaction that you're funny, at least in my high school, right? It was a different time. The 80s, they weren't trying to put your comedy up on a pedestal. So if you made a teacher laugh, it was a pretty big deal. The opposite of that was detention, right? Ali is being disruptive in class is the note that comes home. Ali is not paying attention. Ali needs to focus, and you get some, there's repercussions for that, and it was detention. But that's why I said at the beginning, all things considered, that was a safe space, because the worst that could happen, the very worst, is you get expelled, you still get into another school. At the age that, the Algonquin cast and crew is at, right, there are worse implications for something hugely inappropriate. So, as I said, comedy is possible under almost every circumstance. I've seen comedy at funerals, and it is maybe the most fantastic thing you ever experience. And, when you're you're almost roasting the person who has passed away. And because there's so much tension and so much grief, the laughter that comes is so powerful. However, you may know some families, and I think of my Pakistani family, there's elements of my family that are fairly conservative, making jokes at a funeral in those conservative homes or those families would be grossly inappropriate. They would be like, "Who is this idiot? What are they? Why are they desecrating the legacy and the image and the life of this person who has passed away?" Right. So you have to know what you can get away with, what you can't. And I think often what you need is a friend or a partner who will tell it to you straight. Right? Somebody who will be like, "I don't think you should do that." Right? And if you get that enough times, you go, "Okay, why push it? Why push it?"
I actually did a show in Cornwall this past weekend for a celebration of life, a
Yes.
stand-up show, and I had one joke that I knew I had to say.
Yeah.
I'm like, "So who's here because he still owed you $20?"
That's funny. That's
Yeah.
great.
So many people raised their hand and it cut the tension. Everybody just laughed. It was a beautiful moment. But yes, you need to read the room in those
Need to read
senses.
through. You know what? I've never performed at a funeral. I've said a few words at funeral, but I was a caterer in my past life. Before I was a comedian for 12 years, I was a chef and I was a caterer, and I catered a celebration of life. If nobody knows what a celebration, if anyone doesn't know what that is, it is a funeral, but it's a very sort of progressive approach to the funeral. It's like, we're going to celebrate this person's life, as the name goes, as the moniker suggests, and not grieve over them. And of course, you go through, you process all these. But I was the caterer, and I was standing like in the corner, just sort of watching this celebration of life. And it was one of the most beautiful things I've ever been part of. People just kept going on and talking about the person, and, having, just sharing hilarious memories about how clumsy they were, or how they never achieved or they were a big talker. And everybody was just connecting. This collective sense of grief was amazing. But I'm getting off topic a little bit just because you mentioned it. But,
No worries.
but my point is all that comedy can even be used at a funeral. Comedy can be, even in the saddest places, it can be used. So would it be, I think you're asking, can a student or faculty member use it? 100%. Right? A faculty member, I think when you're teaching, I don't know if anybody's watched The Chair on Netflix right now, but in The Chair, you see those teachers who are, it's a lesson plan that's 30 years old. It's the same lesson plan. It's a little more rigid. It's not dynamic. It hasn't adapted over time. It's not connected with the now. You're not challenging your students. Your students are, they're similar to me. They have ADD-ridden brains, many of them. They're like, they need excitement. They're used to things, they're used to having 15 windows open on their computer. So as a teacher, I think I'd be doing myself a disservice by just sort of like, what do you call it? Stand and stir is what they call it in the food world. But, stand and deliver. And as a student, if you're presenting to, your classmates or presenting to the teacher, comedy is a great way to deliver important messages. Comedy is a great way for you to remember important messages. And comedy also, it's, there's a beautiful collective spirit that you can create if everyone is kind of laughing at the same thing together.
Oh, that is beautiful. I see somebody ask if we can pre-book a comedian for a funeral. I think that will be in my will. Can I get John Mulaney, please? But I do have a couple more questions to ask you, Ali. You did touch base on this question, but I do want to hear a more detailed explanation. So does comedy, I know comedy does cross many boundaries, and there is a thing called a power differential in the corporate setting, in the workplace, and in school. So with the power differential, can humor be permeable, semi-permeable, and what would be your take on that?
Yeah, I think I know what you're asking there, that people in higher positions, it's a tricky thing sometimes, I don't know if you've done any corporate comedy
Yes.
at Christmas, like for Office. it's a weird thing because people don't want to laugh, but then they see the CEO laughing. So then they laugh at the comedian. It's an awful thing where everyone's like, they're not sure what they can do. When it comes to, I'll just call them leaders. You know, you're talking about the power differentials, whatever you want to call them, power brokers or leaders. You know, I didn't want this to be a very technical chat. I want it to be very accessible. But you can look up the research, and there's tons of research on, the positive implications of having a leader who is funny or fun-loving or creates like imagine you're an employee and you have to walk on eggshells around your boss. You have to worry about saying the wrong thing. You're never sure or imagine you have a boss who's, pretty chill, like a friend, but obviously with their limits. And, there's humor is a effective mechanism for coping with stress. There are, this is research driven. There are physiological effects that are very positive, that come from laughter, that come from comedy, that come from the use of humor. So as a leader, as somebody who may have a team that works for them, you have to think about, you want people showing up every day. That's the first basic thing. You need your employees to show up. If you have created and fostered an environment that is healthy and happy and fun, they're going to show up. Once they show up, you want them to do the work. That's the second part of the showing up. Employees who have these positive mental health benefits of humor in the workplace also are more productive. Again, this is science talking, not just me making assumptions. These are all research-based, research-driven things. And I remember I used to work at Future Shop, and I hated that job. I hated selling to people stuff that I knew, they're like, what's the best DVD player? Some of you might remember what DVD players are. What's the best DVD player? And I'd be like, Sanyo. And they'd be like, really? And in my head, I'm like, no, it's Sony, but we have no Sony in stock. So it's Sanyo. And I hated lying like that. I hated selling customer service plans. I hated everything about it, but I loved going to that job. Why did I love it? Because the people I worked with, we were having such a laugh all the time. We were laughing at ourselves, we were laughing at our customers, we were laughing at our boss often. So that was not really a leader who fostered a comedy-friendly environment, but some of the bosses did. And it was just a great place to work. And my father was an academic, he was a teacher, and he would be like, you have a BA and you're working at Future Shop, this is not, a BA is nothing, a Bachelor of Arts is nothing. And I'd be like, I know it's nothing. I'm working at Future Shop. I'm aware that a BA in poli-sci has done nothing for me. I'm working at Future Shop, but I just loved it so much. And even though my father was like constantly on my case, I was like, man, where am I going to find a group of colleagues who are so fun and so hilarious? So comedy will pull you into work, a good humorous workplace. What is your work environment like right now, Janelle? Would you say you bring the humor, or is it a place where everybody's kind of laughing and...
I try not to poke too many, tell too many jokes or try to be too funny, because I was a security guard for about 7 years, and it got me in trouble because those boundaries were not permeable. I had to keep I had to keep a very professional, bravado, if you will. And
that's an interesting read the room example right there. I used to be a chef, and when I was a chef, I wouldn't tell any of the clients that I was a comedian, a stand-up comedian at night, because I was worried that they would be like, this is Quebec, and I'm trying to get, high-end clients, and I was worried they would be like, hey, je veux pas un clown dans ma cuisine. I don't want a clown in my house cooking my food. And so I was trying to keep the two. Then, next thing you know, people start finding out that you do stand-up comedy, and they're like, man, how lucky are we? We have a chef and a comedian in the house. And I was like, oh, the worlds are colliding. But I was able to make it a healthy, positive thing as well. And it was great, and it worked in my favor. But for a long time, I was like, keep them separate. So I would just say that sometimes we keep things separate that we don't need to. But I will say, security guard, you probably are making the exact right call, because you need to have some, comfort and assurance when you have a security guard that they're going to do the right thing. And sometimes joking around suggests like we may not be able to rely on the security guard when we need to.
Well, I worked at the hospitals for a while, and all the nurses and the doctors, they have a very dark sense of humor because they are desensitized. And I also have a dark sense of humor, not because I'm desensitized, but trauma. And we used to try to like talk in private about that. I was trying not to make it a big like in the room thing too much, because again, yes, I need to have a sense of professionalism.
Right. Well, I'll tell you something. Doctors and nurses is a very interesting example. People would think that, oh, they probably don't joke around enough. I mean, you'd probably be surprised to know that the doctors who are in, sort of cancer wards, palliative wards, those wards where there's a lot of sadness typically with their job. They're the ones where humor is the most prevalent. Mm-hmm. And actually, I don't know if you've ever come across Jess Solomon, Janelle, but Jess Solomon is a comedian out of Montreal, good friend of mine. She was a war crimes lawyer. So I think she was working at The Hague on the Slobodan Milosevic case. I mean, she's working on somebody who was like committed genocide against the people, war crimes tribunals. And Miriam is saying she used to work in a morgue. That's a hilarious example. Yeah. I'd love to know what but Jess Solomon said, they were working, talking about genocide every day and the horrors that have been committed by these various leaders. And she said, I've never worked in a funnier place in my life. The amount of jokes, again, dark humor, not dark humor, because humor is also a coping mechanism at the end of the day. Sometimes humor is what gets you through the day at a bad job or, through a bad time in your life. So, Jess Solomon loved it so much she wanted to write a sitcom. She was trying to develop a sitcom around her time working on a war crimes tribunal. So, again, I think that goes back to the idea that is comedy appropriate everywhere? And I would say at some level, it probably is. We just have to work a little bit to find out where that level is. And so that's why I say the 10% also, so people don't come in just guns a-blazing. Did you hear the one about that? No, we didn't. You should never hear that in the workplace. But yeah, I think it's an incredible tool for your state of mental health, for the state of the mental health around, as we talk about mental health and as awareness of mental health issues become so much more part of our everyday, vernacular, everyday talk. I think comedy is something that we should look to more often. I mean, how many people, survived this pandemic courtesy of comedic content on Netflix, on any streaming service, on the web, on YouTube, going back and watching, Friends episodes. And you're like, man, I didn't even like this the first time, but because it's a pandemic, this little bit of comedy is giving something to me, So
we bonded over Tiger King.
What's that?
We all bonded over Tiger King. It was meant to be a serious documentary.
You're laughing too much at what you think is serious. Exactly, which is a perfect example.
We're making great time, by the way, but I do have one question for you that's left. I think we did touch on it, but there might be another little another jewel in there. But is there any faux pas when it comes to comedy and business?
Yeah, I mean, I think... you spoke about the power dynamic earlier, and I think it's very important to, basically, if anybody's watched The Office, do nothing that Michael Scott did. Right? That man was a walking faux pas, right? You cannot you understand your relationship to employees and understand what you can and can't do and what you can't say and what it makes you look like. If something makes you look obnoxious or like a jerk or if you're punching up, this is a very, very common discussion that we have. People may not know that term, but punching up is when a person of a minority or oppressed group takes aim at the oppressor or people who are. So example, if, a brown Muslim Canadian man made fun of Donald Trump, that is punching up. He's a billionaire. He was in charge of an entire country, for better or for worse. If I make a Trump joke, nobody can really be like, oh, Why, innocent little Trump, he doesn't deserve that. Punching down is something where somebody is in a position of either it's lower status, it's some level of, perhaps a handicap or some group that's marginalized and oppressed, and to make fun of a group that already is struggling is not a good look, and it's not great comedy. And if it more often than not, especially in this day and age, that will turn against you, and you will look worse for having tried to make jokes like that.
Exactly. I find I'm not one to tell somebody not to do a joke because I am still learning. I do tell people that if you're going to do a gallows humor joke or if you're punching down, it has to be in the form of a joke. Like Anthony Jeselnik, he's like the master of it. Sure. And everybody knows he's joking because he's always joking. He doesn't say anything serious in his act, and he plays on that. But I do want to get to the Q&A portion of this show, of this live show. So again, we probably have already answered this question, but we're still going to answer it. So we're going to answer live. What jokes, humor should be off limits at work?
I mean, I think different environments, different work environments probably have different rules and, a different, I guess company culture comes into play here. So if you have a company culture that is pretty loosey-goosey, you can probably get away with certain things at one job that you can't at another job. But in general, I think, you should strive to be a decent human being and funny at the same time. It is possible. That is by no means an insurmountable task. It is possible to do the two. But I think that question, what should be off limits? Anything that is, how would somebody feel hearing this if they were in this room right now? And they're the group that I'm making fun of, or if they're the person or the type of person I'm
the big three.
Tell me about the big three.
Religion, gender, sex, and politics.
Politics. Well, I remember when I was a salesperson at Future Shop, gender hadn't come in. This is 1995, 96. Gender hadn't come into it was the big two, and it was religion and politics. Mm-hmm. And they were like, I don't care what kind of relationship you have with your customer. Do not discuss religion. Do not discuss politics. And anytime you made the mistake of doing it because you're like, oh, this is Frank. He's a recurring customer of mine. He always comes here and buys. It'll be cool. It always bit you on the butt every single time. Yeah,
but you're allowed to slap them, the tushy. That's
this guy Frank liked that. Frank was a big fan of me slapping him on the tushy.
Exactly.
No, it was a weird time.
It was a weird time. It was a different time. So next question, what should we do when a joke or a silly comment clearly falls flat with the group at work? Oh.
I mean, it's going to depend on the person who made the joke. Mm-hmm. Right? Like for some people, if they are a very confident person and they make an awkward joke, you can make a raspberry sound. You can make a wah, 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 awkward. But if they're not confident and they're putting themselves out there, and they are doing that thing that I was telling you about, like pushing 10%, and you know that Richard at work never makes jokes, and this is his presentation, and he tried to make a joke and it didn't land. By calling Richard out for attempting to make an appropriate joke. So this is, they're saying a silly comment. They're not saying an inappropriate comment. If a silly comment, attempted joke fails, I mean, the best thing is to try to be supportive, because they made a try. And as I said, I had the benefit of like high school and weddings and a lot of practice before I got on stage at age 34. I had a lot of practice of what works, doesn't. If you're just starting, this is a new approach to you at work and school, using humor, there might be some flops. And so when somebody else's silly comment falls flat, just remember your own silly comment might fall flat one day too if you're putting yourself out there. So the best thing you can do is be supportive, in my mind.
Oh, that was amazing. And hopefully that answered your question. So the next question is, Who or what inspired you both to pursue or start doing comedy? I'll go first.
Yes.
I knew I wanted to be a comedian since I was 14 years old. I always loved comedy when I was very young, but I knew I wanted to get on stage when I was 14 years old because I had a big pop as a class clown in an auditorium. I got that huge laugh. I divided the room. I can't say the joke. It's quite inappropriate, but I had a huge pop and I'm like, I need to get up there. I need to speak my truth. I need to make people laugh. I'm like the Christina Pazitsky in my head right now. I got stuff to say. So I knew. And then in my 30s, I was like, if I don't do it now, I never will. So I found an open mic in Ottawa and the rest is history.
That's great. That's great. And history is just starting in your case, right? You got a great road ahead of you. My answer always, people are left unsatisfied by this answer, but I didn't even want to do stand-up comedy when I started doing stand-up comedy. I wanted to be a chef on television.
Oh.
I wanted to have my own cooking show. And I wanted to practice, but there's not a lot of camera practice that you can get out there. There's not cameras at every street corner waiting to film you, you know? So I was like, okay, if I start doing open mics, and I had been doing these weddings, I've been hosting weddings. And I said, if I start doing these open mics, it'll improve my confidence on stage. I'll treat the audience like a studio audience. I'll pretend like there's a camera out there. I'll make jokes about food. I'll just develop my voice. And then I did stand up, and then I absolutely fell in love with stand up. And then the rest was history after that. But I started it with no interest in actual stand up. Not no interest, but I didn't have any career goals in stand up. I had a singular focus: get a TV show. Spoiler alert, never happened.
You didn't get to practice your yokes? See, I'm stealing a joke from the comments.
Yes.
So another question, this one is for you. Did you use your Muslim background as a base to find your jokes, or lighten the public on the true Islam and not being a terrorist?
So again, this is an answer that's unsatisfactory at first. Because when I got on stage, it was 2006, which feels like it's far enough after 2001. It feels like, 2006. I'm losing track of time. I started in 2006. You'd think that 2001 was 5 years prior, but actually, I was still, anytime I traveled, I was taken to a secondary screening room, and I was like, I missed a couple of flights. Flights just left while I'm still sitting in a secondary screening. No answers coming my way about why I'm there or where I'm looking. I'm trying to get this light off my face.
It's all good.
So and this is embarrassing, but the first few months that I was on stage, I didn't even say I was Pakistani. Like, I was like, are people ready to hear from a Pakistani Muslim? A few of the bombers on 9/11 were Pakistani background. So my dad was born in India, because there was no Pakistan yet. He was born in British India and then became a Pakistani. My mother was born in India, then became a Pakistani. So I was like, I'm Indian, I'm Indian, us Indians, us in our call centers.
Indian by Indian. No, I'm just joking.
Yeah, exactly. I'm Indian, you're Indian. We're both Indian. And then I was even like toying with like Ali, it's short for Alejandro. I was like, I'm ready to be anything but Pakistani to draw attention away from the fact that I was Muslim. But then what happened was I was realizing that as I was catering at the same time. And when I was catering, I would make dishes that would kind of showcase some of these oppressed culture. So for example, Afghanistan at the time was being bombed mercilessly by the US for no fault of any Afghanis. Innocent Afghanis were dying on a daily, weekly basis, and they were not guilty of any crime other than having been born in a country that was now the big public public enemy. So I would make like a Afghani naan pizza. One of my appetizers would be, so Afghani naan is like as long as your arm, it's as long. I would brush the bottom with olive oil. I would crisp it up. I would have, caramelized onions and cheese on it and some, tarragon. And it was very small, like Afghani naan pizza bites. And in my mind, I was like, I'm doing a little bit of positive PR for Afghanistan. There was nothing good being said about Afghanistan. And I was like, let me do this little PR. And then I'm like, wait a minute, why am I doing PR for Afghanistan, but I won't even do positive PR for myself as a Muslim Pakistani on stage. So in under a year, I was like, this is dumb. I can actually get on stage and I can convince is too strong, show people that, hey, Muslims aren't maybe everything you see in the news right now. The news is really trying to highlight the worst of a certain group. I am that group. And guess what? I'm here poking fun at myself, poking fun at other people, having a good laugh with you. So I was like, this is an opportunity to remind people that not everything is what you think it is. Not everybody is the same way. It's like, imagine, every German you meet, you're like, Nazi, they're all Nazis, all these Germans. This is what I was feeling like Muslim terrorists, they're all terrorists. And I was like, I have an opportunity on stage to shift that mindset. Now, 50 people at a time, maybe. It wasn't huge. I wasn't going to win a Nobel Prize for my efforts or anything, but I was like, no, this is dumb that I'm not doing this. And so I really like that question. It took me some time to fit into that comfortable place.
I do that with Gotland Comedy. We express solidarity through humor to open up a dialogue so Canadians and everybody on Turtle Island can have a conversation with these tough topics. So I do understand exactly where you're coming from.
Well, and I know you do. You're a great example of that. I have a friend, Lara Ray, out of Winnipeg. Lara is trans, and when Lara comes on stage, she explains what it means in a so when you are educating and entertaining at the same time, I mean, that's better than the best fart joke around. That's really like you're really doing something very, very satisfying, and you're satisfying your own soul on stage. I think that's been my experience in any case.
Thank you. One day I'll burn my soapbox. Okay, so we have one more question left until I bring it back to Susan. So this one's a little long. We'll try to keep it close because we're almost at our time. So when it comes to writing your material, what is your process? Harder than it looks, I know, but wondering if you have any hints for the performing arts students who have all turned in as they work on their own stand-ups for class.
Yeah, I mean, these, like students of my own, what I tell them is that unfortunately, there's no direct answer, right? My best jokes, and this is not inspirational in any way, but my best jokes, my A jokes that I've written in life have come to me when my mind was blank. So I was lawn mowing, or I was snow shoveling, or I was vacuuming, or I was showering, and an idea popped in my head. Maybe that's the suggestion right there. Just do things that clear your head and just allow the funny to come. Colin Mockery has become friends with me over the years. Colin Mockery from Whose Line Is It Anyway? And when I asked him how he prepares backstage before Whose Line Is It Anyway? He said, I eat a ham sandwich backstage. I'm like, no, but how do you prepare? He said, no, that is how I prepare. I do the most mindless, banal thing. I eat a sandwich, I clear my mind, and having like a blank mind allows him to take in all the comedy that's going to come his way on stage. And so I don't know if that was whose question that was.
Terry, I believe.
Yeah, Terry had asked that question. Terry, I wish I had something better for you, but I have friends who sit and they work 3 hours a day, every day. They write jokes, they write. And then they go out of all these jokes, 3 hours worth of jokes. There's 3 jokes here that I would like to put on stage. And in theory, I love that. I love that idea of discipline. I love that idea of that commitment to your craft. I have tried. I can't sit for 3 hours. I can't sit for 3 hours and write. It's very, very difficult for me. So you have to know who you are, what your skill set is, what your strengths are, and use your strengths to your advantage when it comes to joke writing.
Exactly. Mine is from our Lord and Savior, Joe Rogan. No, I'm just joking. I do try to take some time every day to just write premise, keep them in a notebook, and then I go back to them after, and hopefully I can formulate a couple jokes that way. But thank you so much, Ali Hassan. You are an amazing individual in the sense of, like, as an aspiring comedian, I'm just soaking all this knowledge. I'm just, just as all the other students, I'm also also a student of you right now. And I'm
So
just
happy
going
to chat with you.
Oh, exactly. And we're comedians too, so we're used to shooting the shit all the time. Oops, sorry, swear word. So let's bring it back to Susan before I go off the rails. Thank you so much for having us, Algonquin College. Thank you.
Awesome. Okay, thank you. So before I give thanks, I know we're very close to time here. I just want to take a moment and everyone get ready in the chat function. Part of Third Thursdays is that we do a community soapbox, and while we are not in person and there's no physical soapbox, we still want to give the opportunity to stand up on this virtual soapbox. So if you have a side hustle, an upcoming project, maybe you want to collaborate with somebody else on campus, an upcoming event, I want you to post it in the chat now. And as we think about joining our next Third Thursdays, more and more time will be allotted to our community soapbox section, sorry, tongue-tied there. And so I want everyone to start getting comfortable. And because part of Third Thursday is getting out of your comfort zone. And we used to say when we were in person, sometimes people will just come up and say, I'm really terrible at speaking in person. So here I am speaking in person, and we would all clap. And it was such a wonderful moment. So please share anything that you have in the chat box. With that, I want to say a huge, huge thank you to Janelle and Ali. What a quality conversation. I just think getting that insight is so useful. And again, as we've said, after the year and 8 months we've had, it's just something that we can draw on, and we have to remember to enjoy the pleasures in life. So thank you to them. Thank you for everyone who joined. Really quick for my soapbox, I'm going to let everyone know that our next Third Thursday, because we're always switching things up, is our first ever Third Thursday, First Thursday edition. Did I say that right? So it will be taking place on the first Thursday of November. It's November 4th. We have an incredible speaker. His name is Ryan Gorey. He is in fact the architecture of our Ishkaduin in the courtyard. Renowned architect, so very excited to see him. I hope that everyone joins. More information will start to come up on my IAC and on the Student Support Services website, so you can register there. And this event is recorded. Any of the events that you want to go back and take a look at, or it was so amazing so you want to share it with the rest of your colleagues, you can go to the Student Support Services events page, and everything is on demand and you can watch it. So once again, thank you everybody. Thank you to our support team. Thank you to Janelle and Ali, and thank you for joining. Third Thursdays means so much to our team. I'm so happy everyone was so engaged. It was so nice to see. Everyone have a great Third Thursday, and we'll see you next time. Thank you.